Hi, it's Di here with another tutorial. This one's on the Logan Sling Bag by UhOh Creations. This is a unique and wonderful design to make. I'm in awe of Tara's talent. How she created this pattern I do not know, and then also devised how to make it. I loved making this bag. It's like nothing I've made before, and I hope it inspires you to make a Logan yourself. I don't think you'd be disappointed with it. So without further ado, here's my tutorial. Enjoy. Okay, to start with, just an overview of all the pieces. Now, I like to laminate my pattern pieces, and if you've seen other tutorials of mine, you'll know that. I do have a tutorial on my channel that explains how to do it and what I do, so please take a look if you're interested. I'll put a link in the description of this video to that tutorial for ease of finding it. So I've laminated my pieces and I've cut everything out and prepared it, and I've also interfaced it all. Now Tara suggests that we do 2 layers of interfacing on each piece, or certain pieces should I say, and I spoke to her and asked if I could use fusible fleece, and she said, oh yes, by all means do. I've only used it on the outer pieces. I just thought it would feel nice to have that slight paddedness. We're used to feeling foam on our bags, and I just thought if I just didn't feel any kind of padding, I might not find it as comfortable as usual. So I have used 1 layer of interfacing, and I've used black SF101 Shape Flex interfacing, and I've put 1 layer on at the full size of the pattern, and then I cut the fusible fleece 3/8 of an inch smaller all the way around, and I've ironed it on and I've pressed it really well. You know, if you overpress the fleece, it flattens. Normally we don't want to do that, but on this instance I wanted to do that. So I want the paddedness, the sort of feel of the thickness of the fleece, but I didn't want it to be spongy and thick. So I've got the feel that I want. Now, you don't have to use the fleece, but I just think it will give a much nicer feel. So I've used it on the main external piece and on the front external piece. That's the only place I've used fleece. Otherwise, I've doubled up on the interfacing wherever Tara said to double up on, and just put 1 layer on everywhere else. So everything's been interfaced and ready to go. I've got my mesh here cut and ready. So I've got my exterior fabric, my lining fabrics, my mesh all ready. I've bought my fold over elastic in black, and you'll notice you've got a shiny side with the line down the centre and a matte side that you can't see any line, and you fold over so you've got the shiny side visible, and that's like the decorative side. And lots of zips, loads and loads and loads of zips. I've got a number 5 zip, and that needs to be 22 inches in length. And then we've got several number 3 zips. We've got one that's 21 inches, one that's 8 inches, 7 inches, and a lovely little diddy one that's 5 inches. I've never used one this small. So that's all and I've used zip pulls that I buy. I did initially put on the ones you get with the continuous tape, with the intention of giving them a try. I've never used them. I've always used zipper pulls that I've bought. But once I put them on, I'm looking at them and I just didn't feel comfortable using them. So I swapped them for the ones you buy. They just feel better in your hand. But by all means, you use whatever zipper pull you like. You don't have to use these. And the only bit of hardware as such are the 2 1.5-inch D-rings and the 1.5-inch slider. This bag is so economical. There's no foam, which, let's face it, is very expensive, and very little hardware. So it's really cheap to make, and yet it looks amazing. The pattern's so unique, and I've been very excited to make this. And this is the first time. I've not made it before, so I'm doing a tutorial off bat. So I'm learning with you. So that's all the pieces done. I've also marked all the pieces we need to. On the back, I've used white chalk pen or ink pen to mark where we have to mark. So look at the pattern. As I'm doing it, I'll show you where the marks are anyway. So if you haven't pre-marked, it's not a problem. I'll show you as we go along. So I think I've covered everything on that score. So without further ado, we'll get started. And the first piece we need is the zipper pocket front. And that's the piece that looks like that. And it's that piece. So we lay it down, well, looking at it, the curve is on the right, the large curve, and the small arch on the left. And we get our 8-inch zip. I need to measure because that's the 8-inch. Now I've already put double-sided tape along one edge, and we're going to lay it right side up with the zip pull close to the right. Do you know what? I didn't notice that, so that's important. So I need to put some tape on that side. I didn't read that right first time. I did say I'd be learning with you. So I like to always use double-sided tape rather than pins, because pins can cause a bit of an issue and stop it being flat. So I just find it much easier to use double-sided tape. So with the zip closed, right side up, and the zipper pull on the right, we just need to lay it. I'm going to turn it upside down. And it's just going to go over each end by about 1/4 inch. And we just stitch across at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I've stitched the zip along at 1/4 inch. And now we take the 7-inch zip with the zip pull on the right also closed, and we lay along the opposite edge. Again, I'm using double-sided tape, and we stitch that at 1/4 inch seam allowance along there. I've stitched along there at 1/4 inch, and now we just need to press the zips away from the fabric. Like so. And we put this aside until we need it in step 8. For this next part, we need the exterior front pattern piece and the 2 zipper facing pieces. And the zipper facing pieces don't need to be interfaced, they can just be as they are. And then we need to get the front panel zipper template, also known as the zipper pocket back. Now I went ahead assuming that these would have to be cut out as with other patterns in the past, but they don't. I had to actually print off the paper pattern. I was tempted to do it the way I would normally do it, but I wanted to stay true to the pattern. So I'm doing it as instructed. I printed off the pattern in paper and stuck the 2 together, so there's both pattern pieces that have A on. And then what we need to do is we put the template face down, and then we get the 2 zipper faces and we lay them right side up along the 2 edges, making sure that each side that goes over is even. But because I've got pins with what do you say, the glass beads on the tip, I don't want to pin them on this side. I'm going to pin them on this side. So all I need to do is make sure that the zipper facing is face down and lay the pattern along the top edge of the zipper facing and then pin it in place. Both ends. I just want to make sure that that is even. Yes, that's right. I didn't want it to be, in fact, if anything, it's slightly moved, so I'll try that again. You really make sure that it's very accurate. Yeah, and then along the bottom here, the same thing, making sure that it's equal on each side, the sort of same amount of fabric that's poking on the each side. And then we get our pattern piece and we need to lay this so that the sides match up with the side of the pattern piece. So we just have to shift it around. I'm happy with where I've laid that, making sure that the zipper facings are still laying flat, and then pin through all of the layers. And now what we need to do is sew around the boxes. Make sure when you stitch along that your needle goes into the corner, and then turn it and then stitch down and sew on. So you're pivoting on each corner. And this is right, you are stitching on the paper, and stitch with a stitch length of around 1. So it's very short. I'll take it to the machine and come back. So I've stitched around the box. See on the other side how it looks. And you just tear the paper away. You don't need it anymore. And that's why you stitch it on such a short stitch, because if you did it on a longer stitch, there's a risk that you would actually undo some of the stitches. Whereas doing it on a very short stitch really perforates the paper and helps it come away cleanly. Okay, what we need to do now is cut along the centre and leave 1/2 inch at each end free from the cut. If you need to draw a line to make it accurate, then by all means do. But having used a rotary cutter for about 10 years, I'm quite accurate now. So we now cut from the line that we've cut out to the corners I'm just looking closely, and you don't want to cut into the stitching. Make sure you don't go that far, but cut as near as you dare, like so. Now, I would say the only issue with using the fusible fleece is that it's going to be a bit bulky turning this. So hindsight being a wonderful thing, what I should have done was, when I did the fleece, I should have used the template to remove the fleece that was going to be in the box and sort of around it by about 1/4 of an inch, but too late for that. I shall know for next time. So that's all the lines cut, and now we want to push this through to the back. And you have to convince it. It never wants to go straight away. I'm sure you've done other pockets like this in the past. So you just have to show it who's boss. And we need to press it. It's not too bad with the fusible fleece, actually. Not as bad as I thought it was going to be. With it being dark fabric, it's very hard to see the seam. And make sure you get rid of any puckers in these corner areas. I always turn it over and press again, and make sure that at the moment you can probably see, I hope, that the fabric from the back is showing on the front, and I don't want that. I want to hide it. So just roll it over a little bit to make sure it's hidden. And just keep fiddling about with it until you're happy. Because if you don't hide it, it just tends to look a little messy. So it is very important not to have it showing on this side. So, gosh, it's very hot. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to do the same with the piece below and then come back. Once you've pressed them open and you're happy with them, you need to get the zipper pocket piece that you've made earlier with the zips. And this is actually, although it's all black so you can't really tell, this is the wrong side of the fabric. That's the right side. So the right side is facing down. And I've put some double-sided tape along the top of this pocket opening and the bottom of this one, and I'm just going to remove one at a time, otherwise I get into a sticky mess. And I want to you want to match up the sides with the top piece as well. So you want to make sure that they're all matching. Like so. And then remove the tape from this end. So we now take it to the machine and we stitch along the bottom here and along the top there. So there's the stitching, and now we turn it face down and we get our upper pocket back and turn that face down so that the right side is down. This is the wrong side. And again, we're matching up with the edges of the facing that we've put. And I'm actually going to, I've already put some double-sided tape on this part of the zip earlier. And so that's nice and evenly put down. And now we stitch around the rest of the boxes, the sides along the top and the side down the bottom and up the side. And that will have formed our pocket. So here's our double zipper pocket. And out that end. And now all we need to do is baste the sides to close them and trim the excess away, and then we will set that aside. I've actually added my label at this point just above the zip. So if you wanted to add one, now's the time to do it. The next part we're doing is constructing the front upper zip pocket. Now on the pattern instructions, it actually says to place the zipper pocket front, and that's not correct. It should say upper zipper pocket. So that's just a typing error. You are using the upper zipper pocket pieces here, not the zipper pocket front. So we need to lay the front panel right side up, and we get the 5-inch zip, and we want to place it right side down. I'm just going to get some tape, my trusty double-sided tape. And we want the zipper pull this time on the left with the zip closed, and we're putting it right side down along the top of the panel. Hard to see when it's dark and you're using black. It's not the easiest to see. So we've done that, and next we want the upper zipper pocket front, and we want the right side down. We've got two pieces. One is longer than the other. And we want the shorter one of the two. And we want to place it right side down, which is correct. I'm just checking because I've used that's right, yes. So this is the stabilizer I've got here, and that's the right side down. And I'm just going to use some more double-sided tape, because it all helps keep everything in place. So to recap, we've got the front panel right side up, and then we've put the 5-inch zip right side down with the pull to the left and the zip closed. And then we've got the shorter of the two upper zipper pocket pieces right side down like so, and we stitch across the top there at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I've stitched across, and now we want to flip it over to the back. And press them down. And I just want to press on the front as well, because we're going to be top stitching. And now we just top stitch across there. So you may not be able to see it, but I've top stitched across the top. And now we get the remaining upper zipper pocket piece with the longer one. And we want to lay that right side up. So I'm just checking. Yeah, right side up, and place the front panel on top, with the zip edge along the top here. And we just need to base that in place with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So we've done that, and now we need to get the external or the exterior front top piece, and we need to place that right sides down with the long edge along the top there. And I'm just going to add some tape, my trusty double-sided tape. So just helps keep it in place. And now we stitch this fully at 1/4 inch seam allowance. I've stitched that at 1/4 inch, and then we flip it up to the top and just give it a press away from the zip, and we top stitch along there. So that's now top stitched both sides. And now we just want to stitch these two together at the bottom. If you need to trim them to meet up, then do so, but mine actually meet perfectly. So I'm just going to stitch along the bottom with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I do apologise, I actually meant a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, not 1/4 of an inch. And then once we've done that, we just need to do as we did lower down and baste the sides so that we're closing the pocket off. So you now have 2 pockets that are constructed, and we put this piece aside and we're going to do the strap anchors next. So we have our strap anchor piece and we fold it in half lengthways. It does say finger press, but I like to give it a definite crease. And then put the 2 edges into where the crease is. And we just need to top stitch both along both edges. So you now have a piece that's 5 inches long and 1.5 inches wide, and we just need to cut this in half so that we've got 2 pieces that are 2.5 inch wide, 2.5 inch long, sorry, and 1.5 inches wide. And we get our rectangle rings and we fold them over the edge, and we just base stitch along the bottom there, and we do that with both of them. So we now get our strap anchors and we place them in the middle along the edges at the top and bottom of the front panel. And we just base stitch them across to fix them on. So you should now have your front panel that looks like this with the D-rings attached. So we're just going to pop this aside for now, and we're going to construct the expanding gusset next. We need to get the exterior gusset piece now with the ends chopped off and your 21 inch number 3 zip. I went ahead and started the first stage and forgot I was filming, which happens sometimes. But basically, you just put the end of the zip, doesn't matter which end, whether it's the closed end or the open end as such, and just base stitch it 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along the top, and then open up the zip. And I'm going to use my usual cheat method, if you can call it a cheat. I call it an easy life. And just lay some double-sided tape along the edge of the gusset. Like so. And then to peel the backing off. And then lay the edge of the zip along the edge of the gusset. And if my head's in the way, I do apologise, but I'm having to lean forward to make sure I'm lining it up correctly along the edge. And then you can at this stage take it to the machine and base stitch 1/8 of an inch along the edge. But I'm going to kill two birds with one stone and use the double-sided tape as my base, basically. So we go along this edge now. So you will be left with a bit of an overhang, which is fine. We'll be cutting that off shortly. So I am going to just take this to the machine now and base stitch along each side. So I've basted it both sides and I'm just going to cut off the excess zip. And now what we need to do is get two pieces of the tiny gusset end pieces, and we lay it face down like so and stitch a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and we're going to do both ends, and then we open up and press and top stitch across. I'll come back and show you. So here they are, added and top stitched. You may find you need to remark the dot on the back if you used, that's my iron going off to tell me it's still on, if you've used heat dissolvable ink. And the same with your main panel piece, the front panel piece, sorry. I had to remark mine where I'd ironed it. And what we need to do is you need to have the end where the zipper pull is at the top when it's closed, and you need to line the dot up with the mark on the back, and I've also marked it on the front for ease, and we line that up and I hold it there, and then with the panel right side up and the gusset right facing down, right side down, we just clip in, or however you want to add it at this stage, all the way round. And I'm going to open these zips up so that they're not in the way when stitching. I shall just move that zip out of the way a little bit as well. Like so, and making sure everything's even and it's nicely placed, we're going to stitch a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance all the way down. I should have said as well that you sew from the dot to the other dot, don't go all the way to the tip, or the point, whichever you want to call it. And what we need to do now is press the zip away from the main panel. And now we need to top stitch along the edge, just starting from where the tip is all the way down, stitching next to the zip on the panel. Okay, so I've top stitched all the way down, and make sure you don't catch the gusset underneath as you're stitching. Don't ask me how I know. I did catch it, just start to catch it, and I thought, that feels a bit different as I'm stitching. So I'm glad I caught it as I started to do it. Okay, and now we get our exterior main panel piece, and we have to do exactly the same with attaching the panel. And we've got the mark that we marked earlier to line up in the same place on the gusset. And should find that matches, yes. And I'm going to clip all the way around and then stitch again the same thing, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and press open and top stitch. Okay, so I've top stitched both sides. It was a bit tricky doing the second side, so I swapped my walking foot, which I use generally, for my little tiny narrow foot, which made it very easy to do. So if you have a foot like this, I suggest that you use that. It makes life a lot easier. And now the final thing to do is to stitch the rest of the panels together. So from the basically dot on the gusset along, and the same with the top, stitch them all together at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Alright, so the panels are sewn together, and just check at the point of the gussets that it is closed, that there's no seam, which there is, just slightly pushing out. So I'm going to just go over that to close it, so do check. Okay, so I'm glad I double checked, and that's why you double check. So you just want to check both ends, and they're looking nice and neat at the point of the gusset. Just double checking that I've got everything in there now. So yes, so we put that aside. It's all coming together and getting quite exciting. And we're going to do the mesh pocket next. Okay, so you can see what I'm doing, because I've got a black mat. I've swapped for my small green mat to show you. You now need to get the fold over elastic and your mesh that you've cut, and you're going to add the elastic to the inside curve. Just trying to straighten this out for you to see. So there's the curve. I'm adding it to this side, and what I'm doing, you need to keep it taut, but don't stretch either of them, and just lay the mesh so it's on one side of the elastic, and then fold over the elastic so you can see that it's even on both sides, and pin it. So you can see that I'm pinning it and I'm making sure that it's even both sides, and I'm going to pin it all the way. It's one of the few times I'm using pins. I don't want to use the double-sided tape because it may alter the tension of the elastic and mesh. I'm going to carry on doing that and then come back. Before we go to the next part of attaching the elastic to the mesh, I wanted to show you something. When you attach the elastic, if you do a straight running stitch, then you're going to stop it stretching. That's the stretch I have on it. Oh, this way. That's as much stretch as I can have. Okay. If you do a zigzag stitch, that's how much stretch it has. So it still works. I'm going to show you pulling them together. That goes further. You see, so you've lost your elasticity by doing a straight stitch. If you have a machine that only does straight stitch, unfortunately there's not a lot you can do about it. But if you're able to do zigzag, please do zigzag, because you want to keep the elasticity in the elastic. Okay, so I stitched it with the zigzag stitch, and now I've pinned around the edge. It's very important to pin rather than clip, because your machine may, your foot may push the mesh along and stretch it, or want to stretch it. So it's always best, if you can, just to pin it, and then the pins will keep it in place. I'm going to stitch it now, and we'll just base stitch it around the edge. Right, I base stitched it around the edge on a long stitch. I just wanted to say a couple of things. If when you've stitched your elastic you find it sitting up, it's a bit hard to show you in this light, the dark. If it's sort of sitting up rather than laying flat, you've stretched it, and I would advise redoing it if you can, because if you've stretched it when you stitched it, it's not going to have the elasticity that you need on the pocket. Also, I found when I was stitching the zigzag stitch, my walking foot that I was using, which I know sounds bizarre when you're using a walking foot with zigzag, but my walking foot does allow me to do that. It started to stretch the elastic. It wasn't moving along, sliding along nicely. So I had to stop and change to a teflon foot, which is lovely. It slides beautifully, and it literally just slid along. It didn't drag the elastic or anything. So if you've got a teflon foot that can do zigzag, by all means do give it a try, because it's really good. There was something else I wanted to say to you. Can't remember now what it was. That's typical, isn't it? But anyway, oh yes, pins. I pinned all the way around, because if you just use the clips, you have to take them off, and then you're leaving it open, and it can drag and stretch. So, like I did with the top with pins, pin around it, and it keeps the mesh in its place and stops it stretching, etc. So now we want to decide on pockets, whether we want a middle pocket, a middle line of stitching to give 2 pockets, or if we want 2 lines of stitching to give 3 pockets. I personally want 3 pockets. Now, there's no real method to deciding where you want your pockets, because this isn't even. You've got a narrower part than that end. So if you folded in half, that's different. This is laying different, and so on. So I suggest you just literally think, okay, yeah, I want it there and there, and what I would do is decide where you want your pockets, and then if you pin down again to keep the mesh in place, you'll have an idea of where you want your line of stitching to be. If you're not confident to do a line of stitching, and that you're worried that you'll go off, then you know, do a chalk line, etc., to help you judge where to go. But I'm quite happy about stitching in a straight row, and I'm going to put another line of pins across here, and so I'm going to have 3 pockets. I will return when that's done. Okay, I've stitched 2 lines like so, and I also put my label on. When you stitch the pocket, stitch from the bottom going up. If you start at the top, there's a chance you could end up with excess at the bottom. So whenever you stitch any pockets like this, stitch from the bottom up. So we put that aside, and now we're going on to finishing the exterior. So for that, we need to start with our zip. Okay, so we've got our zip that measures exactly 20 inches, and there are 2 remaining gusset pieces, 1 lining and 1 exterior. Then we start at the other end, and what we need to do is lay the lining gusset piece right side up, and then put the zip on top, lining up the straight edge with the zip, like so. And we just need to stitch across there at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I've basted it in place, and now we need to get the exterior piece and lay it wrong side up on the gusset, like so. And we just need to stitch in place at 1/4 of an inch, and that'll anchor the 2 pieces down. I stitched this on with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, folded it back and pressed them both sides, and top stitched across. And once that's done, you need, it's slightly different to the tutorial, because I find that doing it the way the tutorial shows, your zip can twist and not behave very well. So what I do is I mark 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch down from the top edge, and mark it equally on both sides. Then I fold it down. I fold it down like so, and then fold it back on itself, so that basically the zip is bent with the folded edge along there. And over leaf, you may be able to see how it will look. Maybe. I'm going to zoom in when I edit. And then you can either pin it and stitch it to stay in place, or do as I do and glue it. So I just put a tiny amount, doesn't have to be a lot, in there, and on the back fold, and then I clip it till it dries. Like so. So I will return when that's dried. Okay, the zip is now dry, and this is what it looks like. I'll show you like that. So it's got the folds on the back there. So what we need to do is get the bag as we've made it so far, and we've got the marks that we made earlier, and what we need to do is lay the zip face down so that the bag and the zip are right sides together, and we line the gusset up, the dot on the gusset, with the mark that we made, like so. And obviously we need to fold both down, and we're going to we're going to stitch from the dot, so we need to put the dot on the other side as well so that we can see it. So now line up the gusset, the dot on the gusset, because when we're sewing it we have to stop where the dot is, we can't go past it. So I'm going to actually use double-sided tape. Because this is on the curve, it's going to be a bit awkward to sew. So by using double-sided tape, it will make it stop on the curve. So I think I should take stocks and shares in this double-sided tape company. Okay, undo that first. Okay, okay. Right, so peel the tape off the backing eventually. I would sing a song whilst you're waiting, but I don't want to make you all turn off. Okay, so line up the dot again. And obviously, I mean, you can use pins or whatever your choice is, and keep going round like so. And we now stitch along the zip at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, I apologise, but I accidentally deleted the next step that I did. Basically, from where I'm, my last scene where I was laying the zip down with double-sided tape, I then base stitched it to the dot, only to the dot, no further. And then you get one of your main lining pieces, and I got the one that's got the pocket on, because once it's like that it's going to be against the front, so when you open it up, hey presto. So you can choose which one you want, of course. And then again I use double-sided tape to lay it down, and then I stitched at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way down, again just to the dot, no further. So that's where we came up to. I'm very sorry that you don't have that bit, but I've covered what I did. So I have to be more careful about deleting scenes by accident. Now we need to press the exterior away from the zip, because we're going to be top stitching. And although I have folded the lining over to stitch, there's a loose thread there, we're not top stitching through to the lining. We need to top stitch like so, and top stitch along there. I have top stitched all the way down, making sure that the seam allowance was pointing down and we didn't have the lining in. We literally have just sewn along there. And next I'm going to be showing you how to add to the other side of the zip. Okay, to add the other side of the zip, the main panel to the zip, we need to, well, I have added some double-sided tape to the other side of the zip on the right side, and peel the tape off, and then where we've got that mark we made earlier, we line that up with the little gusset piece with the dot again. It's a bit fiddly. And then I'm just going to attach or lay the main panel along the zip on the double-sided tape, and then we're going to stitch at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And we're actually stitching, we're basting. So we're going to baste at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, stopping at the dot and stopping at the zip, at the top of the zip. And once we've basted, we need to add our remaining lining panel piece, and we're going to, I'm doing it with the zip open, it's a little bit easier, but we need to add it so that we're adding the right side of the lining to the right side of the exterior. So we're trapping the zip in between, and we'll stitch the whole length from the top again down to just the dot of the gusset piece, no further. So I'm just going to add some double-sided tape, then I'll stitch at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'll come back and show you. So I've stitched from the top down to the dot on the gusset, and we need to press the seams away from the zip, as we did on the previous one on the other side. it's going to be a little bit awkward stitching the top stitching on this side, but it's doable. I'm finding loose threads here, there and everywhere. Okay, so I think personally it'll be easier to top stitch with the exterior right side out. So if you turn the bag through, it will definitely be easier to top stitch, and obviously we're not top stitching the lining, so if we do this and make sure the seam is pointing downwards so that you're including that in on the top stitching, and do it from the very top down to the point where you stop for the gusset. Okay, once we've top stitched, you should now have a bag that looks like this, or something like this. So what we need to do now is, with the bag inside out, we need to line up the main panel where the gusset is, and we just line up this bit like so, and we stitch across there at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, joining the stitching we've done previously. Okay, so we stitched from there up to the gusset. Got a bit difficult there, so I changed to a zipper foot because it's bulky. My foot wouldn't go over this part, so I changed to a zipper foot and just stitched that bit together. And then if you push through on the exterior, just to check that it's closed there, it's very important that it's closed. And we repeat the same thing with the lining now. And once you've stitched across the lining piece, again check the gusset that it does look something like that. And now what we need to do is sew across that edge. So I've stitched across the bottom and reinforced it with 2 lines of stitching, and then I've trimmed the corners to reduce the bulk when we turn. And then the next part we do is to stitch across the top, both lining and exterior, all the way across, making sure the seam allowance is pointing towards the exterior. And we do that at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I've stitched all the way across, and I've just trimmed that corner piece. I haven't done that yet because we've got to stitch the rest of it together. So now you should have both your ends closed. On this bottom, you've just closed the exterior one, and at the top we've closed the exterior and the bottom, and the lining, I beg your pardon. Now we need to work on the lining. So we get our gusset piece and we put our mesh panel and we lay the gusset right sides together, and with the dot that we drew earlier, we mark it up with the lining, with the line that we did earlier, so that the dot's in the same place as the line. Gosh, it's hard working with the black. Okay, and pin that. And the pin will act as a reminder not to go past there. And then I'm pinning it because of the fact that we've got the mesh I don't want the mesh being stretched at all. I'm going to pin it all the way around and then show you before I stitch it. I finished pinning, so as I said, the dot lines up with the line that we marked earlier, and pinned all the way around, and then we're going to sew from the dot to the dot, literally, at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so that's stitched. And now we do exactly the same on the other side, lining the gusset dot with the line. And again, I'm going to pin all the way along, but we need to leave a gap of about 5 inches in the middle section for turning. Okay, I've pinned all the way along, actually from the very top to the very bottom, and I've left clips in the middle just to remind me not to stitch there, because sometimes you can get engrossed in what you're doing and stitch away. But we're not stitching from the very top, we're stitching from the dot on the gusset to the other end of the dot. So we're just going to stitch that for this next part. Okay, so I've stitched that and I've left a gap, and now we need to stitch the rest of the interior, the lining closed. So we stitch from the dot down to the bottom at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and from the dot at the top to that last little bit there. So we'll stitch them, and then we also sew across the lining bottom at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. We've already done the top, and we just stitch that bottom closed, and then I'll come back. Okay, so that's all stitched, and now the last bit we do before we turn it is lay the lining pieces on top of the exterior and stitch across the top. So we're stitching them together. This will anchor the lining to the exterior and stop it pulling out. So I'm just going to do that. Okay, so we've attached the two ends, join them together, and now we have the big reveal. I always find this bit so exciting. And we just turn it through the gap, and it's a lovely easy bag to turn. I have arthritis and my husband always has to turn my bags for me, but because there's no foam and it's a lovely soft bag, I can turn it myself. It's a little bit difficult with my hands still, but the fact that I can do it myself is great. I've thoroughly enjoyed making this bag, so I hope you enjoy making yours, and I hope my tutorial has helped those of you that like visual learning. I'm the opposite. I don't like watching tutorials. I get frustrated. I want, you know, I want to go faster than the tutorials going and things like that. So yeah, I'm a fine one to talk. I can make them, but I can't follow them. It's funny, isn't it? Okay, so just wasting time for you whilst we turn the bag, and use the ring to pull her through. And obviously your lining's attached in there, so it's not going to come fully out, which is great. There's quite a lot to turn through. Do you know, I don't think I've been more excited and opening a bag through than I have with this one, because of the shape of it. That's fantastic. Okay, so we've got the gap, and we just need to, I've already pressed it whilst it was on the other side, just to help with closing it. And what I like to do when I'm closing gaps, I like to use some double-sided tape, because if you just lay it together, it can shift and so on, and you end up with a less than perfect result. So I like to lay double-sided tape and use that to keep the two sides together. Like so. It can be difficult working with black. There, so that's given it a lovely closure, and I'm just going to stitch it along as close to the edge as I dare. So I've stitched along, I don't know if you can see it or not, let's turn the light round. I've stitched along there as close as I could, and then we just pop that in, and there is our beautiful bag, and the lining fits beautifully. It's lovely and flat, no bunching. Wow, I'm in love. Isn't that great? And of course we can close the gusset. Oh my goodness, I love this. You've caught me at my most excited. Oh wow, and I'm happy with the gusset. Yep, nothing poking through. Oh my goodness, isn't she gorgeous? What a design. Oh wow, I feel like Christmas. Okay, when I calm down and climb off cloud 9, I shall begin the strap. So I shall come back when I've calmed down and stopped gushing over her to do that. So now it's time to make the strap, and I've gone ahead and done it so that for speed, rather than showing you everything. But basically, you've got your strap. You fold over your end pieces by about half an inch, 3/8 of an inch to half an inch, and press. Do both ends. Then fold in half and press all the way along. And once you've done that, bring the raw edges into the centre crease and press all the way along, and then fold in half and press, and then take it to your machine and stitch all the way around, including the folded edge, and then we'll come back to do the last bit. I've made the strap, and she was lovely, but I like to give just a little bit of added strength because we've not put anything inside it like Peltex or a very thick like Decoville and that type of thing. The strap is very soft. Now if you like a slightly firmer strap, what's good to do is to stitch horizontal lines. And so I stitched around the edge of the strap, and then I stitched at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance both sides, and then down the centre, which was 3/4 of an inch seam allowance. So we end up, I don't know if you can see them or not, but it just gives it an added strength. So if you're okay with stitching straight lines, it's worth doing that. And the next part now is to attach it to our bag. We've got our strap and we've got our slider. And what we need to do is slip the strap into the slider and through, and by about an inch. And then we just need to stitch across there. Okay, I've stitched across, and I've actually done 2 rows of stitching. Just snip the thread, just to reinforce it. So I stitched along the edge, and then I stitched 1/4 of an inch from the edge. And now we need to put into our bag. It's very important how you place the strap, because you can so easily put it on back to front. So what you need to do is, you've got your bag, and the top of the bag is here on your right, and then you want to put the strap through the bottom of the D-ring and have it so that the fold is facing towards you. Then bring it round and put the strap through the slider and back out the other side, so that you've basically hidden that part. And then you need to go into the D-ring from the top, and then you'll fold underneath, and that's your strap done. So I'm just going to stitch across here the same way I did that part, and then I'll come back. And there she is. Isn't she lovely? So pretty. That's the back. And there's the front. I'm really pleased with her. Absolutely beautiful bag. Very unique. And I've never made anything like it. So I hope this tutorial's been helpful to you. Do take a look in the description of the video, where I'll place some links that will help, such as for Tara's group and so on. And I look forward to hopefully seeing some of your bags in the groups from the tutorial. If you do make a bag using this tutorial, please do tell people about it so that they'll know to look, and perhaps give them the link. That would be good. Anyway, I hope you enjoy making your bag. Happy stitching. Bye.